let's talk about the power of the internet, which is Maddy Martinez, who's my guest today, reached out to me. She slid into my DMs. Normally, Maddy, I'm the one who slides into other people's DMs.
Oh,
She mentioned that um, Jen Reed, who's a client of mine, who's a really great friend of mine, you're really great friends with her sister, and that you wanted to talk about being on the podcast. And a lot of the things that you shared in that personal DM, I would love to share with the audience because for me, I get a ton of podcast requests. Oh, you should meet so and so, have them on the podcast. And it's a
Mhm.
lot of like corporate pitch. And I think for you, what resonated so deeply with me is you were very upfront about the fact that number one, you help women um, feel healthier, happier in their bodies through lifting, through nutrition. But then the other thing you mentioned is I want them to trust themselves more. And you also mentioned your own struggles with suicidal ideations as you're, I'm assuming maybe before the business, but also as growing the business. Um, and just this whole journey and how as a business owner we really need to be talking about these things because I have still suffered from it, those suicidal
Mhm.
ideations. And it literally stopped me in my tracks, and I think I literally responded to you like in the second you hit me up, and I was like, oh my god, this is so powerful. So first and foremost, I just want to say thanks for being so honest in your DM because it made me stop in my tracks and be like, yeah, I'm actually still suffering from this. And I need to be having a conversation with this woman because I bet you there are a lot of people listening who either A, don't know what a suicidal ideation is, or B, think it's kind of a hot topic where they don't really want to talk about it. So, for those of you who are listening right now and you feel yourself freezing and kind of zoning out and not wanting to pay attention, come on, baby, sit up nice and tall because you need to know this information. And last but not least, I think for those of us who go through it, it can be very, very crucial to not only have people in our corner who know what it feels like, but B, have our friends and family really understand what this means and how they can support us. So I know a big part of the conversation today is going to be about lifting, which is a favorite hobby of mine. But I did want to start there because it was such a holy shit moment for me when I got it. Walk me a little bit through your journey of these like suicide ideations. Did it come with starting the business? Did it come from the misdiagnosis? And if you want to tell a little story about what you were
Mhm.
referring to, because I also had a health journey where
Mhm.
as I was starting the business, 90-gram later and almost a fatal disease later, did I figure out
Oh,
what was
wow.
going on. So I'm glad we're
Mhm.
talking about this.
And now I have a million questions for you.
Yeah, you can bring it.
So my journey with like suicidal ideation was very much of like an effect of the misdiagnosis I was going through.
Mm,
And this was before I was 20 when I got sick. So this is like 8 years ago. Super healthy. I was doing CrossFit at the time. Like nothing was inherently wrong with me. I didn't even have a PCP. Like that's how
mm,
like not worried about my health I was. And I had a small injury, and then the injury kind of kept progressing to things, and next thing you know, all of my joints are hurting. I can't walk anymore. I went from kind of how I look now to gaining a ton of weight because I was using food to soothe myself and have feel some type of difference. Feel something. And it really took a part of my identity away because I was just starting to start coaching. I was just coaching CrossFit classes at the time, and I've been athletic my entire life. And next thing you know, I can't walk. I have a toilet seat raiser on my toilet. I have bars in the shower. I have bars on my bed to get out of bed. I lost my identity. I lost my ability to function and just live comfortably. And the suicidal ideation part came in when I realized when I would wake up in the morning, I would be the most stiff, the most in pain.
mm,
So going to bed was the most traumatic thing for me. It's like I know I'm going to wake up and be in worse pain because
mm.
as the day would go on, I would loosen up. And they had, I say misdiagnosed me because I think I was presenting these issues, but
Yeah,
they gave me the stamp of psoriatic arthritis because I quote unquote had psoriasis. I don't actually have psoriasis.
sure.
And of
So
course,
what?
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry to interrupt. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say they just said I had psoriasis, so I was on steroids for years, and because I had the joint pain, I tested negative for rheumatoid. They're like, that's psoriatic arthritis. So that's how I got that diagnosis. And I was on Humira and told, this is the rest of your life. When it stops working, we'll figure it out from there. And, I was like, what? Like, and at that time, I, was so sick. And where the suicidal ideation comes in is where, you go living your life, having so much fun. I'm 20 years old too. I can't do anything. I
Mm-hmm.
don't leave the house anymore. I stopped coaching because I couldn't walk. I would need, even getting out, like, my 21st birthday, my boyfriend, which is my husband now, but we were at with friends at this restaurant sitting outside, and I was having like my first alcoholic beverage, like, in public. And I remember getting off the chair. I had to ask him to help me get up because I couldn't get off the chair. That's where I was at that point. So for me, it was kind of like I noticed it start happening, the suicidal ideation, to where I was like, I have no reason to live.
Mm-hmm.
I can't walk. I'm not athletic anymore. My identity's gone. I'm in pain 24/7. They told me I have to be on this medication for the rest of my life. Like, what else is there? And it got to the point where I was kind of nervous about driving because I would envision myself like, oh, if I just drove off the road, I
Right.
wouldn't be in pain anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have to, like, I would fall asleep crying because I knew how much pain I would be in the next day.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. You're reminding me a couple things. You just said something like, when you were coaching, right? And then this happened, immediately the word imposter syndrome came up for me, right? Here I am,
Mhm.
supposed to be an athlete who coaches other people, and I can't even get out of bed. And I'm also trying to be like, rah, rah, you got this, go. And I like am
Yep,
not wanting to be here anymore.
yep.
But then you also said something really important that reminded me of a girlfriend from high school that I was best friends with. And after having two kids, sadly, she is nearly handicapped. And
Oh,
her whole identity, her career, her that she had prior, her being a mom, like everything has drastically changed. And while she's never said that those are the thoughts that she's had, the amount of depression that can hit, right? Of like, oh my God, I'm supposed to be this because this is how great my life was, and that's the direction I thought I was going. And now I'm this, and I'm totally confused about what my purpose is and my passions. And I feel, like it's that feeling of like feeling like we're behind, but also feeling like I'm going in the completely wrong direction that I was supposed to be going
mhm.
in.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I started to interrupt you because I wanted to like get to the end of the movie real quick, which is, so what was your diagnosis?
Oh, so, and I always say this because I don't want it to ever come off where I'm like down with Western medicine, right?
Yeah,
It
right.
has a time and a place, and
Yes.
I truly believe Humira saved me when I took it, because if not, I wouldn't have gotten to the point where I could start healing.
Yeah.
Um, so I wish I could say it was, oh, that one thing. It was not. It was a spider web of things that affected my body. And it
Okay.
kind of comes down to things that happened when I was younger. I was definitely had mold exposure. I
Okay.
had my adenoids taken out as a
Okay.
young kid, and they have a ton of research showing that, like, you will develop autoimmune diseases later
Okay.
in life with that
Yep.
kind of removal. I had a lactose intolerance starting from a young
Mhm.
age, and recently found out that both my mom and I had candida overgrowth. So my mom gave
Same.
me that candida overgrowth through birth. So I was already starting off like, you're going to have a crappy health, immune system as you
Mhm.
get older based on those, factors in the beginning. And then I was on a copper IUD for years, and I have a very low functioning liver. So I basically had like I don't want to say overdose, but like too much copper in my body. My
Yeah.
liver's not functioning well. I already have candida overgrowth. I had mold exposure. I had all of these happening because I had that copper IUD, and it was just kind of like a storm happening.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest symptoms of having leaky gut, which I know is like kind of a controversial thing, but when you have things, intestinal permeability, when you should not be having that level of it, is skin issues
Mm.
and joint pain.
Yeah.
So that's why they were like, here's your psoriatic arthritis slap. No, it was the crux of it was the fact I had all these things causing my my, I'm blanking right now, the microbiome of my stomach to be
Mm.
very permeable and not strong. So I started the journey of healing 2023 January, and then my last dose of Humira was May of this year.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
you're reminding me a couple of things. Number one, I have a very similar story in the sense that I would think I was 26. I was kind of had been at my job for a while, like right out of college,
Mhm.
and was having extreme fatigue, low, not even like low, I wouldn't call it low libido. It was like low libido when it came to work. Like I just didn't want to work and I couldn't work and I was in pain and I
Uh-huh.
was uncomfortable. And I went to Mass General Hospital and they diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome at 26. And
Mhm.
for those of us who now know what chronic fatigue syndrome is, it's likely a concoction of other things going on in the body that
Mhm.
you need to get to the root cause of it. And I ended
Mhm.
up about 10 years later changed careers, and my boss, I was telling him the symptoms and he told me that his wife had had similar symptoms. Thank God I met him because he introduced me to a doctor that literally changed my life. She's been on the podcast. Her name is Dr. Wendy Trudeau, and she works for a company called Five Journeys, or owns a company called Five Journeys, and
Mhm.
they're based in Anita, Massachusetts, right? So I go in,
Mhm.
they give me the whole, okay, tell me what's going on with you. And I remember at that time I was actually dating this guy who was also into CrossFit. He had owned a couple CrossFit gyms. And I was telling him what was going on. I'm like, I'm so unhappy with the way that I look. I feel like I'm bloated. Like I feel like I'm sore. I'm tired. I'm this and that. And he was like, I'm going to recommend you do two things. Number one, I'm going to recommend before you go to that doctor's appointment that you write down every single symptom that you have that you don't even think is related.
Mhm.
And he's like, and also, I want you to ask them about getting off birth control. And of course, we're like having sex at that time. So I'm like, what? You want me to go off birth control? And he's like, yeah, you've been on it since you were 16. Like,
Oh my God.
it's worth getting off of it. So at this
Yeah.
point, I want to say I'm like, probably, I'm not 36. So it had to be, um, it definitely was like early 30s. Okay. So by the
Mhm.
time I'm 16 to early 30s, he's telling me, write down all your symptoms.
Mhm.
I then go to the doctors with this like a like little like piece of paper, and I was like, "So
Uh-huh.
I'm dating this guy," and he told me to like write all my symptoms down, and I did. And so I wrote them all down, and then one of the questions was, "Are you on birth control?" And so
Uh-huh.
they were like, "Okay, first step, we're gonna test you for gluten and dairy, but first we're gonna test you by having you eat gluten 1 week, no gluten 1 week, no gluten the next, and see how you feel." Immediately
Mhm.
felt like shit. I was
Mhm.
lactose intolerant, right? They got me off the
Mhm.
birth control. And
Mhm.
it's interesting how the bloat just, whoosh, the inflammation just immediately started.
Wow.
And I like called him, he lived in Chicago, and I was like, you are so right. Like, you should be a doctor. Like, this is insane. I was just, it's so funny when you look back at like, I didn't understand why he was in my life. I didn't understand why that job came into my life. And there were times where both those people felt a little like almost like volatile. Like I would question my self-worth around them. And I now look back and tell this story and I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
God, like these are why these two people came in. And
Mhm.
what was really crucial is I think something you said was that also taught me that Western medicine doctors, who are your PCPs and your primaries, they only have so much education that they went through within their schooling,
Mhm.
and that you have these
Mhm.
holistic providers and naturopaths, functional nutritionists, doctors, etc., who have gone into what they call 5 layers deeper, and that's why our 5 journeys came from for this doctor. What are the
Mhm.
chemicals you're being exposed to? What's on your
Mhm.
skin? What's your laundry detergent? What are all these things?
Mhm.
And I was like blown away. And so now, over, it's been close to almost 10 plus years now. You and I probably would do great at Whole Foods. It's like, okay, I'm gonna grab that laundry detergent. I'm gonna do
Yes.
this. I'm gonna have this. I'm gonna have all these products that are like all organic and all natural.
Yeah.
And man, oh man, when I am exposed to something like a Tide or something like that, I really
Mhm.
will break out. My skin is, and people will go, oh, but that's just because built a tolerance to it. It's like eating gluten now. Like, it's just because you haven't eaten it, you're going to get sick with it. And I was like, yeah, because it's bad for my belly. Because I also had leaky gut. And so to fast forward it, because I'm sure you had some of these questions too, and this kind of ties back into building a business,
Mhm.
is when I learned I had leaky gut, I didn't go full into like treating it. I mean, yeah, sure, I did some supplements and I certainly did some things that I could do, but I was still kind of toying with, can I eat gluten? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I eat
Mhm.
sugar? And it wasn't until, and I had candida overgrowth that whole time, and it wasn't
Mhm.
until 2021, I'm in my 2 years of business. I am having the same exact symptoms that I had. I can't get out of bed. I've slept 8 hours. It feels like I've slept four.
Mhm.
The can't leave the house because you're going to the bathroom all the time, like craving sugar, like all of these painful periods. And again, I thought back to Noel, that guy that I was dating, and was like, oh my God, let me go down and write a list of the symptoms that I'm experiencing and let's see who I can bring this to. And sure enough,
Mhm.
worked with a girl by the name of Meg Gerber, who I, funny enough, had met at Five Journeys. And she did a whole panel for me, and we realized, oh my God, okay, parasite, C. diff, SIBO,
Mhm.
um,
Oh.
did I say C. diff? Yeah, SIBO. I mean, Candida. There was a slew of things that were going on. And I was
Mhm.
like, I've been here before. I know how to do this. But
Mhm.
honestly, we tried to go through Western medicine just so that I could get insurance to cover it.
Mhm.
Insurance wouldn't cover it. And
Of
so,
course not.
of
Of course
course,
not.
because you need your joints ache, right? So like I already
Mhm.
have stuff going on. So now I got to get a chiropractor adjustment every couple of days. I need this, I need that. And
Mhm.
that adds up. I mean, it was literally
Mhm.
90 grand to be able to do it. And I remember that whole time going through it and then even afterwards being like, how I'm supposed to act like I have my shit together when I own my own business. And I'm making
Mhm.
myself so sick because I'm worried about having enough money.
Mhm.
Did any,
Mhm.
now that you sort of are out of you're out of the clear, so to speak, meaning it sounds
Mhm.
like you're feeling better and whatever, and
Mhm.
your symptoms have decreased. How has that journey played a role in your own experience of running a business, but also as it relates to how you're helping your clients when it comes to lifting, when it comes to nutrition, things like that?
I think it's like twofold because I went through the first, I would say, all of last year, I it was on my mind that like, oh, I'm gonna get to a point where if I don't get off Humira, we're not actually seeing if there's gonna be a reaction. So
Mm,
that was kind of like on my mind. It's like we can only go so far in this healing journey before because Humira is an immune suppressant. So like I had no immune system. So even though we're doing all this work, we don't really know like, okay, are the joints actually not going to get achy and inflamed until we actually, bite the bullet and get off the Humira. So part of that was a little bit scary and kind of like always in the back of my mind. And
mm,
I think that's the same thing when it comes to, building a business. It's like it's scary. It's always in the back of your mind if you're going to fail. And then recently, when I got off Humira, I was slowly titrating off. So that's a dosage you take every other week. So we went to every other 3 weeks and then 4 weeks. And then I was like, oh, wow, like nothing has changed. I
mm,
spent a year and a half at that point rebuilding my gut. And you saying parasites, it's like, oh yeah, I did have parasites too,
mm,
right? It's so layered.
mm,
But I spent a year and a half rebuilding my gut, building trust that what I'm doing is it's working. I'm seeing, positive side effects along the way. And I'm building more trust in myself that as we stretch out the dosages, nothing was actually happening. I wasn't waking up like I had a terrible, terrible fear of me stopping Humira meant death
sure. Going
for
back
the
to that
longest.
routine. Yeah.
Yes, thinking back to that deep dark hole of living, and I was like, I cannot go back there. And I did a ton of nervous system work, still doing that work, because if I were to still feel that way, I guarantee something would have flared up because my body would have been like freaking out the entire time. And I think for a lot of women, they get so scared when it comes to lifting weights. They think they're going to get bulky. They think they eat more protein, they're going to turn into looking like a male bodybuilder.
Mhm.
And that is a fear I love to break and destroy for them basically by slowly doing things like we're not going to work out like every day. We're going to work out 1 or 2 days a week and
Right.
build your confidence from there. And especially with food too, like women always say, oh, I struggle eating 100 plus grams of protein. Well, they struggle because currently they're eating 30. So 30 to 100 is a huge jump. So just slowly building that up. Let's add a little bit more here. Let's go for 50. Let's go for 75. And then when you build that trust of my body's not changing in a way that I hate, I'm not turning into this ogre beast. I'm lifting weights and I'm loving the way I look, and we increase. That's building that trust. That's where, the magic happens to where you like really fall in love with feeding your body more and lifting weights. And this feels so congruent to my journey of like trusting myself more and even recently getting off Humira they say it's like 10 to 12 weeks to where it comes out of your body fully. And
Mhm.
then around like 12-week mark, I had like the worst leg pains. And I was like, oh my God, like, is this it? Is this what it is? And of course, my functional coach was on vacation. I'm like, I'm not going to bug her. I'm just going to sit with it. And then the next couple of days, it was gone. And then I talked to her and she goes, oh, that's actually a side effect of a hormone support that you're on. Just keep monitoring, see what happens. I had no leg pain after that. That was
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
So it's just having, someone that can support you and remind you of like, hey, this is actually called, because of this, it's not that. Reminding you, we're gonna keep trusting. Your body's been showing us it's doing fine without it.
Yeah.
Um, and just trusting yourself what you've proven already.
You bring up a couple really important things that I was reminded of, like coming out of the crux of this 2021, 2022, really into like 2023 healing, right? Because it does it. I mean, guys, it takes years to heal this
Mhm,
stuff. I mean, we've been exposed to so many antibiotics and chemicals and all this other stuff. So it took a while. And
mhm,
I had gone on Prozac because the suicidal ideations and the moods were and I'm not talking moods like I'm fine and then I'm down. It was just more like, well, I felt like the character Sadness and like Inside Out. I would
mhm,
constantly, I have a lot of energy and I have people will say, I love your energy. But there are times where when I get quiet, that sadness can take over pretty quickly. And so I went
mhm,
on Prozac and I didn't realize that it had added 20 pounds pretty dramatically. Like from February to
mhm,
October, I didn't really notice it. October, I ballooned.
mhm,
And and that was 2022. And I remember calling my fitness trainer and being like, I'm coming back to the gym. Like I don't know if it's because I'm not working out as much or whatever. I've been doing other workouts, but I hadn't been doing as much. And the reason being again is when you know this, like I was so tired and I was just my energy was
mhm,
low and I was trying to keep the business afloat and be there for my clients and I was putting myself first, but I was also putting them first at times and just trying to find this balance. And thank God he encouraged me to start lifting because
mhm,
what's interesting is once I dropped the 20 pounds, and he said it's going to take you probably 3 to 6 months. It took three. Um,
mhm,
but mind you, he didn't realize I was on Prozac. So it took like a good year
mhm.
for him to be like, "What? The weight's not moving. Like, what's going on? Like, is it your food? What is it?" And then I was like, do you think it could be the Prozac? And he's like, are you fucking kidding me? Of course it's the Prozac,
Yep.
We just had a good laugh about it. Took 3 months, changed my food a little bit, and then it was so cool to see when the weight fell off, the muscles that I had,
Mhm,
and I just didn't realize that I had them. Like, and don't get me wrong, there's some muscles I'd always had from dancing and stuff, but like it was so cool to see that I'd built such a strong foundation and I felt really comfortable in my body. And I remember one point I like got out of bed and I was like, look at you. Like I said out loud, I go, look at you looking so strong. Like, and I felt strong too. And one
mhm,
of the things that I've pushed back on him about my fitness trainer, that I'd love your opinion about it, and if you don't
mhm,
know much about it, that's okay, is syncing up your workouts with your cycle. So when you're getting your
mhm,
period, so I'm of the belief, and you had said nervous system, so I want to talk about a couple of things. Number one is with the nervous system. For any of you who don't know, essentially the best way I can describe it is if you think about from head to toe, you have all these cords that are running through your body, and it literally your head talks to your hand, which moves, your lips are moving, it like signals to your body to do certain things. But if you have stressors and pressure and what I call like kinking a water hose, what happens is the energy can't flow through it. And so that's what Maddie was talking about earlier is like she had to do some nervous system regulation stuff. So it's deep breathing, it's rocking, it's movement, it's these different things that you can do that sort of unkink the water hose so the energy can run through it and you have more energy, you're more
mhm,
productive, you're sleeping better. And I'm very grateful that I've had quite a few people come into my life to help me understand what that is and understand how to do it because we're seeing a lot on social media about high cortisol and essentially all they're saying is you're stressed and you don't even know it. And here are some of the symptoms that you could possibly have if you're stressed. And I think we have been a society that has been exposed to so much stress that we don't even realize that we have such a
mhm,
high tolerance for it, right?
mhm,
So I love that you talked about that. But then for me, the research that I had done was I was like, okay, so if my body is running on empty, aka my energy level is running on empty, the days leading up to my period and the couple days after where I'm bleeding really heavily, running on the treadmill is not happening for me. Like, it's just
Mhm.
not. Can I walk? Yeah, but like even that is pretty rough. And so there's been a couple school of thought. Most either male naturopathic doctors and or fitness trainers have said it's fine, keep pushing. Your body can afford that. It can do that. That's how it's going to change and grow, and you're going to be able to get more energy. I'd love to hear your point of view from a woman who gets her period, um, as to like, do you change your workouts based off of, or your lifting schedule and your cardio based off your cycle?
So, long story short, no, I don't.
Okay.
And part of that is if you were having that extreme variations in your period, very heavy bleeding, super fatigue, doubling over in pain, that's a side effect
Hmm.
of you have some hormonal things to work on.
Hmm.
It's not, and I never try to be a coach that I'm not. Like, I'm not the hormone specialist coach.
Yeah.
But from what I do know, I always say the math ain't mathin' with it. There's
Yeah.
not a ton of research that shows there's a need to adjust your workouts for your where you are at in your cycle. Now,
Hmm.
if you feel like dog trash, do that. I'm never
Yeah.
gonna say ignore your body. But what I will say is you have some things that need fixed, and you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't
Hmm.
feel like it's so hard to get the workout in. It's so hard. I'm not gonna say like I don't feel that occasionally. Like,
Hmm.
my hormones have done like a 360 since before I was on a copper IUD, but I don't change my workouts because my side effects are not nearly as bad of what they used to be. It's kind of like if you remember the craze when everyone got like really into seed cycling.
Hmm.
That is also kind of the same thing. Like, could it help? Sure. Right. There's been a ton of good research that shows that fish oil is actually like omega-3 supplements are, I want to say they're just as good or slightly better than taking ibuprofen to help with period cramps. So, of course, different things, if you're seed cycling, different variations of fat are going to be helpful during different phases of your cycle. But again, if we're having that intense of side effects, we need to fix the actual problem.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not a necessity to change your workouts according to your cycle. And if you are feeling that, it would be like, okay, let's for sure change it, make it more approachable so you can do something still. I
That's
always rather someone do something.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I was listening to I can't think of her name right now. I just saw her at the store yesterday. Is this naturopathic who talks about periods, and she was saying, yeah, you should not have super painful periods. Like, that is just not
Mhm.
a thing you should have. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that's all I've ever known. And that is because,
Yeah.
again, it's the exposure to maybe certain chemicals or drugs or things of that nature. And so it's been really fascinating. So I appreciate you saying that, because I do think that, to your point, you got to listen to your body, right? You're not going to push
Mhm.
and force it. But in the same breath, I notice a huge difference when I'm doing yoga during ovulation and
Yeah.
yoga during luteal, right? Like, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But I love that. Is like, let's get to the root of like what's going on. As we kind of close the episode out here, I'd love for
Mhm.
you to share um, just anything that you feel like a business owner who is in your shoes and is growing,
Mhm.
what advice would you give them as they're growing, as it relates to taking care of themselves?
You know, putting yourself first, of course, that's always, whenever I was even having in the past year and a half of going through all these like trial and tribulations, getting testing, trying to figure out what's going on, is making sure, you're supported and, feel supported and have a system because it's really hard to serve your clients well and
Mm,
show up on social media if you feel like your hair is on fire.
yeah.
And that's been like very important to me to always have support from my own functional coach, from my own business coach, from all of those things. And where I feel like I'm in a good position, I'm always going to serve my clients better.
It's so true, because I feel like for me, I have way more energy when I do that to then be able to get more
Mhm.
clients or onboard them or
Yeah.
serve the ones that I already have. And so I think that's just a really great reminder. What about if people are feeling like they want to work with you and they are feeling inspired after talking to you or listening to this episode? What would you recommend that they do? How can they get in touch with you and work with you?
And you can find me on any of my, I'm pretty sure they're all the same, Maddie.nourish and lift. Um, when this is coming out, I probably just have like an application in my bio, like the link, or you can
Mm.
just send me a message anywhere.
Awesome. All right, Maddie. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And you guys check out Maddie. And if you end up working with her or you've listened to this podcast and something we share just really hit home for you, please send us a DM. Just give us a little love. Be like, that really hit home for me because, as Maddie and I are having this really honest and raw conversation, it's so helpful to know that when somebody else is listening to this, it's as if like three girlfriends are just having a chat, and it's like, oh my gosh, I heard that. That really hit home for me. Like, thanks for sharing. And share this with somebody who might need to hear this message as well. So thanks everybody in health and happiness.